Lucinda McKimm, we meet online. We struggled to get here with the time delay and two tired mums couldn't work it out, but we're here.
We're here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, it's such a pleasure. Your podcast, Ready or Not, is one of the best resources for mums, but also women, I think, on the market at the moment, because it's so, everyone's honest at the moment, but it's, I guess, a reflection. I think I relate so much to a lot of your comments, which is why I love it. But I'm desperate to hear, like, how did Ready or Not come about? What is the story?
I feel like it was a long time in the making because I think I was one of those people that very much wanted motherhood and a career. I know a lot of people say that, but I was very 50-50 in them. Like not one out. And I wasn't like that cool career person that never wanted to be a mum. In my teens, in fact, I was probably the opposite. I was probably thinking more, I'll have a baby when I'm a bit earlier and whatever my job is at then, I guess I'll sort of stick on that trajectory. So I think that coupled with the fact that I'm just a bloody overthinker made me always question, like, how the fuck do mums do this, particularly mums, but all parents. I'd seen my sister-in-law do it and she owned a business, but I still couldn't understand how her weeks ran. My brother is a very even parent to an extent. She's the one who, I guess, pulled back on work, but otherwise he's very good and there. And I still couldn't see how on earth does a week run? So I guess it was that nitty gritty stuff that led me to start Ready or Not, is understanding how mums literally went about their day. What I probably didn't realize that Ready or Not would discover is more the stories and feelings around it. Like I think I wanted to more understand, like, how much mat leave did you take and what flow and effect did that have? And how did you ask for a salary raise when you're pregnant? How did you tell your boss you're pregnant? What I didn't anticipate was like the power of the actual stories and feelings and thoughts around it. So that's sort of how it started, and I'm already going on a tangent.
God, so how old was Ray? Or were you pregnant with Ray when you thought about the podcast?
When I thought about it, it was during COVID. I worked full time. We even recorded 3 episodes. Loz and I, it was always my idea to begin with, but Loz was interested and happy to come on as a co-host. So originally we interviewed 2 or 3, I can't remember, people. And we were going to start putting it together with both of us as the interviewees in that Ready or Not style. And then I think what happened? I think I became pregnant and quickly realized that a full-time job, a pregnancy and a side project wasn't really going to be a stunning use of my time. So I think I just put it on the back burner, and I was always nervous about putting myself out there in podcast and social content format. My background is in writing. I wanted to make a blog, but everyone was like, it's too late to start a blog. Like they just don't work anymore. Maybe as a part of your brand, great. But if you're not already a news resource or your design files type of platform, I don't know how you actually do that from scratch today. So everyone's like, forget about a blog. So then I think that coupled with my hesitation of putting myself out there, put it on the back burner. And then I was about 6 months into my mat leave with Ray, where I was taking 12 months. I sort of thought to myself, it's now or never, because it will be too hard to start it if I return to my paid job. Yeah. And so then, I started when he was about 6 months old.
Wow. And so how did you and Loz decide that you were going to be sort of, I guess, the face of and the voice?
Yes. So then it pivoted into me just going off and doing it. And Loz had nothing to do with it basically until she came on with Witching Hour. She said to me, this was your idea. I'm now pregnant. She was now pregnant with her second child. Too much for me right now. I'm working nearly full-time hours, 2 kids, blah, blah, blah. Your idea, just run with it. And if it makes sense for me to jump in at any stage, I will. And so it would have been how long into the show? About a year and a bit into it is when we started Witching Hour, which was our more banter-based podcast that releases once a week too. So that's how she then came on board.
It is so funny. Originally, the first word, I knew a gorgeous friend of mine who, I can't remember how it came about, but we just became friends, and I was like, oh, I'd love to share this idea with this particular person because I think she'll get it. Anyway, I created a pitch. So I sent her the pitch, and it was absolutely bizarre. She was like, wait 1 second. She emailed me back and attached almost the exact same pitch she had created about a year before.
Wow.
Same concept, same sort of like proposed guest, same conversation ideas. Like, it is so amazing how I think women like you and I would say we're both highly curious. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so curious about how things work. I love the behind the scenes of anything, like whether it be a movie, a series, whatever. I just want to know, like, how did that happen? So it was really your curiosity to see how on earth women work and mum, which now you do, that led to Ready or Not.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you say that. There'll be things that will come up on ads or in movies, and I'll have the weirdest questions or comments to Hayden, and he will just be like, I've never thought about that. I'll be like, oh, okay. Well, this isn't
That
interesting
is,
for you, and it is for me. So that's actually a really
yeah.
good way to put it.
Yes, that is. Do you know what always gets me is like the continuity of a scene. And if they cut and someone's eating and all of a sudden, I don't know, like their food, I don't know, the timeline's messed up. I will spot
Yeah.
that very
Oh,
quickly.
same. Or it's just something that's so unrealistic in a script that isn't trying to be unrealistic. I'm just like, how are the people falling for this? Why is this show being rated well?
I
Drives me
know.
mad.
We should watch TV together.
Yeah.
Um,
We could be
but yeah,
Gogglebox friends, actually. We might have to pitch ourselves one day.
I reckon that job is pure gold. I would love to
Heaven.
be a Gogglebox person.
So
So
good.
in all the women you've interviewed, and you've interviewed some really like top tier highbrow women. It's sometimes I see your guests and I'm like, wow, like,
You're one of them, Tori. Don't forget.
oh, thank you. But you do like Justine Cullen. For me, growing up in the model, I was a modeling agent, so she was, you know, an editor. So she was someone I just always looked up to, and she's one of many. But in interviewing all of these women and having discussions about kids, raising kids, work, those conversations about telling your boss you're pregnant, etc. What have you found has been the main theme when it comes to the struggles? Like, where is society, so to speak, falling down when it comes to us gals?
Oh, that is such a good question. A really common theme, I will get to more of the struggles, but the first thing that just came to my mind when you said that was that there is literally no rule book for this. There's no blueprint for how you navigate paid work and motherhood. And that's perhaps what my intentions of a late 20s who sort of first had this idea thought that she'd hopefully find is like almost a set of rules that you follow and that makes life easier. That is simply not the case. Everyone's got their own version of what works. Everyone's lives are so different. Everyone's resources are so different.
Mm.
I think where we're failing is probably that regardless of what's happening in our household, society as a whole still designs our lives around the mother or the primary caregiver being there for the child. Kindergarten hours. I'm not even there yet, but what the fuck? How are you meant to engage paid
What
work in
the
any
fuck,
traditional
indeed.
way?
Yeah.
So I just think, and even childcare, my husband actually does more of the drop offs and pickups than I do, but they'll still call me for all of the admin, even though they speak to him more. So I think it's more that the societal expectations of a mother do not correlate with what might be happening inside of her home. And I
Mm.
think that makes it really hard. And then you add on a grandparent layer where, with no ill intent, my mother-in-law always asks me the logistical questions about, does this date work for this? Can we have lunch on this date? And I pretty much I love her and I have a great relationship with her and she's amazing and I don't do it out of malice, but I force Hayden to take over all of those conversations, but it still comes to me. So I think it's those little bits and pieces. It's even if things are progressing in our household or our friendship groups, it's still the broader society that perhaps holds us back.
Yeah, that like social expectation or life admin expectation.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that is so ingrained and like it deepens so much. Even the things that I find myself thanking my very willing 50-50 partner, the dad of my children, for. Deep
mm,
down somewhere inside of me, I must still be unlearning that being a mum means I should harbour all of that. And if he does his bit, then that's amazing. But he
mm.
wouldn't put me on the same pedestal that I would put him on for just being a 50-50 parent.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't know, I don't know if it's ingrained in women or it's the fact that we carry the baby. So we always have that like intuitive connection to the child. So wherever they are and whatever we're doing, it is always they are on our minds. And not only are they on our minds, but everything around their little context is on our minds constantly. And you can't ever escape that, even if you sort
100%.
of, you're present or you practice self-care or whatever, it's still there. It's the most prominent thing. But I
A
would
perfect
say
Sorry, you go.
majority wise for the other sex, that usually the dads, I don't think that they would carry that same thought process all the
Yeah.
time.
A perfect example is I've really started upping my exercise more so than I did in my first postpartum because my mental health was struggling just a little bit. Just two kids. Wow, this is a lot. I need a break. So we've made a really conscious effort to get me out of the house for Pilates. And I'm having intrusive thoughts when I'm in class, either at the start or the end in the relaxation moments. I'm
Yeah.
thinking all these terrible dark thoughts about what might be happening to my child at home. When Hayden goes to work, he's not having those thoughts.
Mm. So in that moment, how do you get through the moment of having that intrusive thought?
Oh,
What
I
a
just
bitch
have
of a
to
thought to capture you
it's
at like
so psychotic.
Pilates.
Yeah. Yeah, here you are relaxing. I'm going to ruin that for you. I just have to really talk to myself very as much as maybe as though my mum would maybe, and just be like, Lucy, you know that's not happening now. You know that they are in great care with your husband and
Yeah.
you know that they're okay. And then you just check your phone afterwards and hope to God that you're not like crazy thoughts aren't real. Not crazy. I don't want to reduce it to that because intrusive thoughts are a really serious thing. But those thoughts that ran wild, you just have to hope that yeah, they didn't play out the way that you worry that they will.
Yeah, totally. I think they're just so irrational, but it doesn't make them any more um, a sense of like, it doesn't make them any more realistic in your mind. If you're having an intrusive thought, you're going through those motions. It's very hard to. It's easy to say, "Oh, don't be crazy," but you're not crazy. Like it's
Yeah.
just again, it comes down to I don't know, the worry that a mother, carries all the time.
And I read somewhere recently that we carry some of their cells. I don't even know how to word this scientifically, but like some of the birthing cells to do with them. Wow, really bad terminology. We carry that around inside of us for 27 years.
27 years.
So we're physically connected to them. And I think that surely plays a part in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I do staunch feminist. I understand that 50-50 is required, but I will always believe that because we carry that child, there will be a connection there that will never exist for the male, for the dad, or the partner who didn't carry the child. Because there's that innate connection that started as, the child and you start as one and then you become two, but that never fades away. That will always be imprinted on your psyche and your relationship. Always.
It's an amazing responsibility. I remember Nell Frizzell said on Radio or Not that she grew every inch of her boy, everything about him, every bone in his body, his blood, everything about him, she grew with her body and with her milk. And she said that's a wild responsibility to carry around. And it's one of probably the most profound things anyone said. It really stuck with me. So I know what you mean.
Mm. It's so funny because in that same breath, I think sometimes I look at, especially Hamish, who's my 4.5-year-old, and he has tendencies to really worry about others. And then I can see when he sees someone else that he loves unhappy, I can see him feel that. And I'm just like that. And it's a tiring way to live sometimes. And I often think like, I wish I didn't grow that part of me into you. Like, I'm really sorry, kid. But,
That's really interesting. I'm not really there yet because raised two, I'm starting to see glimmers of his personality, but that will be a really interesting thing to navigate. We're not quite at the stage where I'm aware of what I've passed on to him. But that again is a wild responsibility to carry around.
Oh, absolutely. Because so much of you, um, it's so nice when you see yourself in them because it's beautiful. But then, yeah, sometimes you do see those sides that struggle a little bit and you're like, oh, wow, that is how do I make you not necessarily stronger than I am, but how do I give you those tactics really early on? So I don't know, you can
It's
not
really
become,
interesting
I don't
that
want to say not become like me, but like how do I help you through that? So it's a
Yeah,
tough
sorry,
one.
I think we're on a delay, so that's why I interrupted you. Sorry. But it's really interesting that you say that because I've never thought about this until right now. But my mum has always built me up in a sense of saying that I'm like dad. And she'd
Mm.
be like, "Oh, it's so good that you're like dad in X, Y, and Z ways because I could never do what you do and you're amazing," which is sad because in a way she's sort of putting me up on a pedestal, which maybe you naturally do with your kids. I don't know. But it's really interesting. I've never likened that to her saying that in a lot of ways I'm not like her personality wise.
Mm. Yeah, it's such an interesting thought as I'm getting older and I'm learning to get to know my parents as adults, not parents,
Yeah.
now that I have a child that's slightly different. And for all of the times I think I've judged them or I've been angry at them, you flip it and you're like, oh, wow, I actually totally see how unreasonable I was. But on the
Yeah.
flip side, you also see the fact that every single human, if it's your parent, if it's your grandparent, we're all just people at the end of the day. We all have feelings. We can all have really hurt feelings. We can all feel left out. Like all of that really childlike vulnerability is just present in every single person, regardless of age, regardless of family context. Fascinating. And
I
it doesn't
think
really
that's a
hit you until you're
really,
raising your own kids. You don't have that perspective.
yeah, I reckon that's a really stark part of becoming a mum for me is it probably happened a little bit earlier than becoming a mum in the sense of realizing that my parents were just people. But it's one of those really stark things that you learn, like picturing your parents just go through the motions of what you're going through. And it's almost a bit jarring when you realize that your parents don't have the answers and then you become the parent that doesn't always have the answers. It's so weird.
Yeah, God. Do you know what I dread? I dread so much when the boys get to high school and I'm the parent who has to help them with the homework.
Homework. Same. So
I mean,
much.
like,
Like,
I'm
do
up for
not
the
come to me with
challenge, but
maths. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. It's
English
a lot.
lessons, great. I'll
So,
help you with that. Not maths.
what do you think has surprised you, like, and delighted you about women that maybe you didn't anticipate to learn over the course of the potty?
I mean, there's been lots of lessons in the interviews themselves, but I would say it's actually more been that the subject matter makes people really passionate. I've had so many people that I thought would never say yes to my little old show that have wanted to come on and been a part of it and then gone that next step of if you've had to cancel because of sick kids or whatever it may be, they're so supportive and they'll say, good on you for setting boundaries. So I think what I've learned is that mums really want to be heard, which is something that you've probably learnt a lot through your show
Mm.
too. Mums really want to be heard. Mums really want to support other mums, despite this narrative that can sometimes be pushed out there that we're all out to get each other and that it's a big competition. And, if this mum's anti daycare and that mum is pro daycare, then they're never going to be friends. Like there's all of that going around. But my experience has been the opposite. It's that mums are really there to support each other and they
Mm.
want to listen and they want to be heard.
I love the fact that I love that you say so many women that you didn't expect or wouldn't have expected to be excited are, because I agree, women, mothers do want to be heard. And I think there's so many women out there who want to break the idea that their lives is easier because they've got a really great job title or a really great wardrobe or potentially a husband with a bit of money. Like that does nothing takes the hardship of motherhood or the complexity of motherhood away. And obviously, a lot adds to the struggle and adds to the amount that you deal with, but nothing will ever completely strip a woman of hardship through parenthood or motherhood, especially mental health. That's always, occasionally, when I put up posts about mental health and I, explain what I go through, I am always shocked by the types of people occasionally that come back. So I'm like, I never would have anticipated or expected you to have this. And it's the same when they're reading my story. They're like, I never would have
Yeah.
thought you went through X, Y, and Z, because we all just make these I don't know, these like wild assumptions, but at the end of the day, we're all in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that I don't know if you saw the other day, but I put up the Instagram post. I actually don't follow the Kardashians at all, and I'm not saying that to be like, I'm above that shit, because I'm not. But I just genuinely don't follow them, don't follow their show, don't know much about them. But someone sent me a message about how Kim Kardashian said that solo motherhood is really hard, raising kids on her
I
own.
saw
And
your
I think
post.
and I was so overwhelmingly surprised and delighted that when I said, what are our thoughts around this? I don't want to bash Kim, but how do we feel about a privileged person saying that motherhood is hard when she obviously has so much at her fingertips? And the vast majority of people said she's still a mum carrying the emotional responsibility of motherhood. So yes, it might be easier for reasons X, Y, Z, but you cannot strip away the emotional toll of motherhood, which is exactly what you've just been saying. And I was really, again, impressed by women that we could hold space for a billionaire that we might not even agree with. A lot of the things she does, I do not agree with. And just the idea of a billionaire sort of gives me the ick, to be honest, whether they're male or female. But the fact that we could still have space for her, that raising 4 kids with a partner who's been emotionally abusive and done some pretty dangerous things and damned her reputation out in public, the fact that we could still hold space for her, that all of that is challenging regardless of money, made me feel quite proud, I want to say.
Yeah, I like the word impressive. It is impressive when women can look at someone like that who can be completely polarizing and very easy to pick apart. But it is nice that we do still have the amount of compassion required to acknowledge the fact that motherhood is, same. There's, the core elements of motherhood are the same, regardless of the situation. I remember when I was first breastfeeding Haim and I was having that first experience of like up every, what felt like every hour in the early days. And I would find it quite depressing because it was just lonely and a bit shitty, and I still hadn't really found my way. And every time I had a moment of this sucks, I would think about celebrities, weirdly enough, that I loved, thinking they also did this, / they might be doing this at the same time as I am. Like, it's everyone is going through this. Like, it's all
Yeah.
women. I don't know why, but I'd often think of I think it was Meghan Markle, who I don't know much about, but I would often think of her and think she's also doing this.
Yeah,
Like,
she's doing this right
no
now.
one is
We should
immune
get
to
in a
the
group chat
feeding.
together.
Yes, absolutely. So I did have to laugh the other day because on your Instagram you've got that fab little, I don't know what you call it, like the reels or the stories, the summaries,
Oh, yeah. What do you, highlights?
the
Highlights.
highlights, and you've got
Yes.
the shit mums do. And you had a day, we had sick kids, a work meeting, a logistical nightmare on your hands. That made me laugh, as did going back to Justine Cullen, her episode when she was talking about flying to New York Fashion Week when she was still had a baby on the boob, so she was pumping and dumping in the streets of New York during the most glamorous time. So when it comes to the podcasting element, because of course we've got paid work, motherhood, and things like this, even if they do bring in income at the start, I'm assuming it didn't. What made you, it's a clusterfuck and it is hard and stressful. And sometimes I think, like when I'm having moments, I think towards you're choosing to do this, like you don't have to put this pressure on yourself. But why do you opt in? What do you love about it, or what keeps you here?
Oh, God, that's a great question. Why do I keep doing it? I have had those thoughts lately, especially because I guess my mat leave with Ray was really traditional until I started Ready or Not, in that I had 6 months where I just really engaged in very, very little paid work. And so that felt like more of a cruisy sort of start. And then I was probably working on it for a few months before I hit go on it. And even then it was smaller and easier to manage, whereas now we have sponsors and we have another show a week, and we've actually also added a third show a week. So there's a lot going
I
on. Why do I
saw.
do it? I'm just obsessed with storytelling. That's why I do it. I'm obsessed with storytelling and I'm obsessed with people. And I truly believe in what we're doing. So we're making money, but not heaps. I will not pretend we're making heaps. It's not paying me a huge salary. So really I could, if you were being really, I guess, pragmatic about money, you would not. I mean, you might have stopped 6 months ago. But I truly believe in what we're doing. I think it has a purpose. What I struggle with is that I find it hard to put myself out there properly. Like, I could try and, I guess, become a bit of an influencer, and influencers are great. A lot of them are. Some of them aren't, obviously. Some of them probably are less ethical than others. But that's great for people that are happy to put themselves out there. I'm not. It's just not me. It makes me uncomfortable. Like me putting up those Instagram stories about the shit mums do. That's the most forward facing I've ever made myself. And I had anxiety all day afterwards. So the struggle, I guess, for me has been that I've probably gotten in the way of my own success because I'm not willing to help the show grow in the way that perhaps it could if I was a bit more real and a bit more out there, because people love people. But I guess the reason I keep doing it is just because the DMs I receive, the stories that I've been able to tell, and the community we've been building, I just can't tap out of it. I love it too much. Doesn't feel like work. I mean, it does at times, of course, but for the most part, I'm just obsessed by it.
Did you ever read Motherhood? No, I can't remember the pink
by
title.
Jamila.
Yes.
Yes.
Can't remember her last
Yes. I
name.
read it pregnant.
That was one of the first books I read that I thought, oh, finally, like I'm getting my hands on something where I can really relate. And it was before I had a baby, but I could hear all their, like it probably spoke more in the dark times than the happy times, but in a way that it was like, it was really nice to see like the truth. Because, you know, when you're pregnant, everything's pink and blue and fluffy, and you know it's going to be beautiful. You know you're getting the gift of, you know, the best thing in the world. But I was so curious, like you are. I was like, but I want to hear like what, when shit hits the fan, or when you are stuck, or when, like, what then? And I loved that book because, you know, women were coming out and saying, this is what I went through. And I was like, finally, someone is giving me some juicy stuff.
I know. I loved that book. I actually dog-eared some pages in that of people to interview, and I've never looked back actually because I read it pregnant, and I found it incredible to read pregnant actually. My tip would be, if you're buying that book, read it pregnant if you haven't already and you haven't had your baby yet. Because once I had Ray, I actually couldn't bring myself to unfold, that doesn't even make sense in this context. I couldn't bring myself to uncover or like unveil those emotions again. Maybe I will one day, but it's such a beautiful but emotional book. And once I was going through those hormones myself, I was like, fuck, I can't go back to this book for a while. But my God, is that one of the most beautiful books I've ever read? Definitely.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? It's so, I'm actually listening to, speaking of the Kardashians, I like you. But I actually think I would like it, but I'm so far behind that I can't dive in. But I'm a big Made in Chelsea, huge fan. Anyway, I'm reading Louise Thompson, one of the main characters, her book, and it talks through the trauma of her birth, which really did change her life, and it, you know, threatened her life. But I find some of it too, I don't relate to it because I didn't have a traumatic birth, but I'm only 2 years since having my second, and I still find reading that so upsetting for her that I find it hard to listen to, which is bizarre because I'm always like, you know, you go through your other friends and family struggles as well. So we're always surrounded by miscarriage and, you know, even worse, stillbirth, and you experience it. But sometimes when you've got the choice to read it or put it down, it's a powerful thing to be able to put it down, even though you want to so empathize, and you do with the story. It's a lot. Like, it's reading those things, it can be so heartbreaking, even when you're so detached from the person.
Yeah, it definitely affects me. Anything along the lines of motherhood and struggles to do with it definitely affects me more than I would have anticipated. I remember there being a story in that motherhood book about a girl whose mum died either a few months or maybe a year into her motherhood journey. And I could still cry now thinking about the way she writes about those precious moments that her mum had with her baby before her mum died.
Isn't it crazy? That no, it's a show, Boy Swallows the Universe, which then became a TV show. I watched the first episode, and I know people rave about it, but because there was a little boy that was struggling, I cannot watch it. It's too much. I'm not there yet emotionally to be able to watch that with
I totally understand.
I just automatically relate it to, what if that was my son, and I'm out. Can't do it.
Totally. There's a show that was out recently about a boy going missing, or a movie, I don't know. And Hayden said, should we give this a go? And I was like, are you actually out of your mind? Why would I want to watch about a young boy being lost or whatever happened in it? I was just like, you've literally got to be mad. There's no way.
I know, it's so hard to disconnect from those feelings when they run so deep. Going back to social media, because this is such, I love podcasting. I love conversations. What I don't love is the huge expectation for social media. Instagram's one thing. TikTok, I've just come onto TikTok. And don't get me wrong, I see the value in it, but it adds such a huge amount of work to create one little, like, a day in the life of video, which lasts about 60 seconds. That's a big commitment to film everything you do and cut it down. And what I struggle with sometimes is I'm filming it, doing it, going, why do I expect people to care what I'm doing? They've got their own days. Like, it feels self-indulgent. It feels vain. But then you speak to the people who are like trying to help you build your brand. They're like, that's what you're going to do. You've got to turn your brand inside out and show the world. So obviously you don't feel comfortable doing it. How do you put boundaries around what you will and won't do?
Oh, so Loz recently made a TikTok for us, and I think there's like 2 posts on there. It's very meager over there on TikTok land. And I did say that I was willing to be a bit more, I guess, silly and like those sorts of things on TikTok. Hasn't happened yet, so we'll see. I haven't really put boundaries around it per se, but if it gives me the heebie-jeebies to the point that like my chest feels tight after I put it up, I'm probably going to delete it the next second. It's funny though, because so many people responded to me when I put up that Instagram story series of the Shit Mums Do, because it was all about, for anyone that didn't see it, which is probably everyone, it was about doing the dance of daycare. I had my first proper meeting for a client outside of Ready or Not to do some freelance work. I had to end up cancelling, going to Melbourne, all of that sort of stuff. And I think, well, firstly, so many people responded to me being like, fuck, you need to turn this into a reel. This is the realest thing I've ever seen on this topic, blah, 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 blah. But I think my boundary around it is, okay, if it really does connect with people, then that's great. But I'm probably going to bring like my most bogan self to it so that people know that I'm not being, I guess, self-serving, which, I mean, maybe we worry too much about this crap, because if someone else puts up something really real that's obviously not trying to, be told how beautiful they are or whatever, I don't think that they're just the most self-involved person on the planet. So I don't know. Why do we care so much? I still don't know the answer to that.
I always think when I put up reels where I'm featured, a lot of them, or like talking to camera or stuff, I often think my friends are going to think I'm such a wank. Like, what?
The friends
and
thing.
That's
what I'm constantly worried about.
Yeah, it's like it's brand. You've got to do it, blah, blah, blah. Because when they put up stuff like that, which, to be honest, my close group of friends, I'm definitely the one who is doing it far more. I guess that's just the industry I'm in. However, I would never look at their content and be like, what a dick. Like, it's the opposite. But you do. It's so hard to take yourself seriously and create such, I don't know, like real content and put yourself out there, knowing that certain people in your life will see it, and you worry what they think. I worry what they think. I often think, do I love the sound of my own voice?
I know, fuck, it's hard. Even, especially for the fact that I created Ready or Not. So no one asked me to step into this role. I created it. So it's always been such an interesting paradox that I don't really want to put myself out there, but at the end of the day, I created this show. I've always tried to appear more as like a journalist type, but at the same time, people love people. I did all the video production actually for Jess Hatzitz and Bree Johnson, who own Frank Body and Willow and Blake. They've got an online brand course called Of Course. And I remember Bree saying in that course while we were filming, people love people. They want to hear brand stories. And me just being like, fuck, damn, I have to show more of my own story, don't I? But how the hell do I do that? And then on top of that, Loz is very much like, doesn't worry what other people think. She's incredible like that. We should all be more like Loz. And she's like, Lou, bloody put yourself out there more. Who gives a fuck? And I think, why can't I be like that?
I know. It's so funny. When I watch your content, I'm always like, I want more. Like, I want to see more of that because it's so relatable. But then I know what it feels like filming it and putting it up. And not only is it time consuming, but it's also like potentially it's you at your worst. And you're like, do I
Yeah.
really want the world to see me when I don't even want to see myself? But I'm choosing to put it out there, but I have the choice not to. It's
Yeah.
such like it's a huge thing now with any brand, the level of, I guess, expectation or what people want. And I guess you
Yeah.
do have to feed into it to an extent. But yeah, it can be hard to
It
sort
is
of
really hard to put the boundaries up, though. And then on the flip side, I think, well, if there's someone else I follow that I think speaks about motherhood really interestingly and makes me feel seen, I'm like, why can't I give myself the grace that hopefully this platform is allowing other people to feel that way? I look up at this person and put them on a pedestal, but I think that I'm the biggest dickhead ever for putting up one Instagram story a fortnight where I'm talking to camera. Like, fuck,
I know it's a lot.
grow up, maybe, Lucy.
I don't know. TikTok is, I have someone like who's amazing who helps with my TikTok. So basically she briefs me and says, she gives me a brief of the type of content to film, which is amazing because I guess sometimes it can feel, because social media is a funny one with motherhood. Like you're either looking at the women who are, I feel like we used to look at the women killing it and it was very polished. Now we're at the other end of the spectrum where we're looking at like the dregs of the day and the worst moments. And
Yeah.
I often look at it and I go to contribute to that. And I'm like, I don't want mums who are pregnant, like my friends who are pregnant, to look at this and be like, okay, so this whole motherhood thing is a hoax, it's shit.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that balance right, to be like, it's really hard sometimes, but it's still the best thing you'll ever do. But
It's
it can be
incredible.
hard to manage how much you're feeding into both sides. But the reality is, it is both sides. And some days
Yeah.
it's 20/80, some days it's 50/50, some days it's 199.
Yeah. Yeah. Often it's 199. No, I'm kidding. It's great a lot of the time, but it is incredible how impossible the equation is of how to even express the struggles. Some people will say you're complaining. Others
Yeah.
will say that's the realest thing they've ever heard. And then sometimes I feel like I'm only sharing the good stuff. Whereas just before, like I was honestly nearly in tears in the living room, both kids crying, screaming. I was at my wit's end. And then the next second, I'm laughing with them both on my lap with my toddler kissing my baby. And it's the most euphoric moment of my life. How do you
Mm,
capture that? It's so hard. And I'm not going to capture the tantrums for the sake of people at home. I'm all for
mm.
talking about them. And I'm not saying that people can't share. They can do whatever they want with their own lives. But how do you capture without totally polarizing people? Like the gray area is very hard to capture, but that's probably, I guess, the middle ground of those really terrible moments that you don't want to scare people away with the perfect moments where you're like, that's too beautiful. I feel bad for people that don't really have it this way. Not going to
Mm.
share that either.
It's so, I feel like I just am always really aware of not offending anyone. And I feel the same with the topic of speaking with, because the first word is all about both women and women with children, mothers. But I never want to neglect women without children, should it be for choice or fertility issues or whatever else. They're not there in their lives. And we often talk about the productivity of mothers and how mums shine when they have kids and blah, blah, blah. And I always think, I've got people who I love that are listening to that going, what, so I'm not productive and I'm not worthy of this choice because I'm not a mum?
Yeah.
And it's
And then on the
hard.
other side, you have the people that say, well, actually, that has not been my reality. Motherhood has totally hampered my productivity and I can't make it all work. So the spectrum of motherhood, I guess, is so fraught in that there is so much delicacy around it and there's so much emotion around it. It's
Mm.
so hard to know how to express it.
That's why I feel like, that's why I think I love your podcast, is because social media is one thing and we do see light and shade in people's lives. And even when I'm creating my own stuff, it's light and shade, but it's really the conversations where you can hear emotion, hear experience, hear context, that you start to understand that, just like you said about Kim Kardashian and women being impressive, how they got behind her. I think every woman is truly trying to encourage and be such a cheerleader for their female friends whilst going through whatever they're going through. Like, we all congratulate every single woman regardless of what she's doing or where she's at in life. But social media, it can be really jarring because it can paint such a light with one post and one caption. It's tricky. But then again, we've got to do it because without it, we don't have a brand. So it's like, what?
Exactly. And without it, there's no honesty out there. It's really interesting you say that because The Cut posted those two really polarizing views on motherhood. I'm not sure if you saw that the other day. One was that what if motherhood isn't transformative at all? And the other one was actually motherhood changes you for life. And I saw some comments on the post, which I hold a lot of space for grief in motherhood, but someone wrote something along the lines of, I lost my baby last year and it's really, really deeply offensive to see people joking about wanting to fall down the stairs so that they can end up in hospital because motherhood is so hard. And someone wrote, I'm so sorry for your loss, but people aren't actually joking about this. People are finding motherhood this hard that they want to be hospitalized. And it just goes to show how fraught the conversation is, because at one end of the spectrum, you have people who fall pregnant easily and go through motherhood relatively easily. The other end of the spectrum is infertility or losing your baby, which, is not the order of things. We never expect to lose our child before we leave this world. And so, of course, there's going to be so much backlash in that space, because it's all well and good for me to talk about, or for my guests more, I guess, so than me, because I probably don't specifically talk about my motherhood experience that much unless it's in relation to theirs. But it's all well and good for a pretty privileged white person from a middle-class society to talk about the struggles, but that might not land well with some people. So that's another challenge. But do you know what? Also, the easiest stories to find are the people that are perhaps working in a business that they want to promote or that have some sort of platform, because they're the people that are A, easier to find online, and B, that are willing to promote whatever it is that they're selling or whatever it is that they're doing or whatever book they're releasing. One thing I really struggle with is that the stories that I do want to tell that I haven't really been able to find yet are your low socioeconomic family that don't have an aspirational job at all. They're just working to get money on the table and every hour is a struggle. Or the mum that left a DV situation who ended up homeless for a period or couch surfing with her kids because that was a better reality for her than living with an aggressive or violent partner. I find it hard that I'm not representing those stories. There's lots of stories that I am representing, but I do sometimes wonder, why aren't I getting more backlash? That a lot of these people, even though there's diversity in colour, there's diversity in sexual orientation, there's people who have children with special needs, there's all these different stories, but still I feel like I'm only capturing part of that audience, and that does sit heavy with me. And sometimes I do wonder why. I don't even know how I got to this, but I do think, are people going to come at me that I'm not representing every single motherhood experience?
Yeah, I agree. I've sadly seen stillbirth really, break someone so close to me, and I've often thought I would love to have that discussion with someone who's gone through that to provide that resource. But then again, it's very hard to say to someone, to ask them to open up that exceptionally traumatic time, because it feels like it's not for the benefit of a commercial podcast. It's like literally to create some kind of resource that is helpful and people can gravitate towards when they're having the worst time of their lives. Which, to be honest, like The Cut, I often repost what The Cut write about. Sometimes I find it, like, everything's jarring to an extent, but they are very brave in what they allow women to, in what they publish, what women say. And we have to acknowledge that people do have those emotions. Like, yes, other people have gone through way worse or different things, but we can't dilute anyone's reaction, because it is all valid and it all has to be said because someone will relate to it. It is helping someone. At the same time,
I agree
it's
so
really pissing
much.
someone off.
100%. Like, we have to find a way to hold space for all of these stories. I think people need to acknowledge their privileges and all of those sorts of things without question, but we can't always have a whataboutism where a mum who seems to have a good life is considering throwing herself down the stairs because she feels that bad because of motherhood, that she wants to be in hospital. We can't say that just because someone else has lost their baby, that experience isn't a valid and fair one, because it is. So I think that's the really hard thing about motherhood. And finding how to be real online about it and what sort of stories to uphold and to give voice to, is that it's probably one of the most fraught topics under the sun.
What is so also incredible, I guess, is time. Like, I remember you've had them on your podcast. Oh my gosh, full Beyond the Bump.
Sophie and Jade. Yep.
Sophie and Jay. Yes, and obviously I've listened to them over the years, but when Jade sort of goes through her first pregnancy, her second, and then her postpartum depression after the third, there was something that I didn't relate to her story, but that's deep, dark time she went through, like driving herself to the hospital, saying she was going insane, not being able to recognize her kids after the third. Because I think often we just expect that if you've got 2 kids and you're feeling great, the third, whatever. But I think
Totally.
that timeline of, where you are in your parenting journey, and just knowing that no mum is ever immune to something shitty happening and going through a really bad
100%.
time.
Which again comes back to Kimmy K. I can't believe how much I've referenced Kim Kardashian in this chat. I never would have guessed that. But it's a really, really obvious example of that. It's hard for everyone. It's great too, but like it can really touch you in wild ways.
I find it more than anything else, it's so comforting. Like hearing other mums explain their experiences doesn't necessarily always make you feel better when you've seen someone have a shit day. You're like, I'm killing it compared to that. But seeing both the highs and the lows of other women, it just allows you to not be so hard on yourself, because women are so hard on themselves. Every time I have a shit day, I just feel like, what the fuck? Like I'm failing, like get it together. But that pressure we put on ourselves to just, have the perfect day and feel the right feelings and practice gentle parenting at all times of the day. Like it's never going to be a realistic goal, because we're all going to fall down eventually, and we're all going to make mistakes and have regrets and, whatever else, even when it comes to like creating content, putting it up there and then thinking, well, can't think of anything worse, pulling it down. Like it's very fucking hard.
I've done that so much. Like I made a reel the other day of a joke, like a day in the life of a baby, and it's Posey pretending to narrate my day, and she's like taking the piss out of me. But I was just like, I've got to take this down. I actually can't handle it. And I pulled it straight down.
Oh, stop it. So I would have loved to know what Posey thought of your day. Oh my God. Well, look, I know that you've got 2 kids who are probably going to be home from the park soon, and I've got a baby who will be awake any moment. But I do want to finish with the famous word, the first word. But just given where you are at, so Ray, how old's Ray now? Over 2.
Yeah, he's, what are we, June? He's 2 years and 2 months.
Okay. And then you've got Posey, who's 5 months. So what is the first word you think of with all of that in mind and work when you hear the term breastfeeding?
Oh. Restrictive. And I love breastfeeding, so I don't mean that as negatively as it will sound, but she will not take a bottle at the moment.
Yeah.
And she won't particularly take formula in a bottle. And Ray exclusively breastfed for a year just because it was easy, not because I'm anti anything. And then he had some bottle refusal things down the line. And I said this time, I'm not going to pump as much as I did with Ray because I was just sick of pumping. And Ray was in special care for the first week of his life. So I think there's a tiny bit of like trauma to do with pumping because I had to do so much of it at the start. And so this time around, I was like mixed feeding from, week 6 or whatever. Let's get the formula out there. Let's get a bottle into the system every now and then so that I can leave when I need to. The trouble with the fact that if she does take a bottle, it's only my breast milk, is that still requires more out of me. I have to find some time in the fucking day to pump. And I'm like, when do I do that? Like it'll go 3 weeks and I'll go, fuck, I have not pumped once and I don't know when I'm going to do it. So as much as I love breastfeeding, and it in a lot of ways means freedom because you can do it from anywhere. You don't have to think of a bottle. You don't have to think of sachets of formula and all of that stuff. At the moment, it's restrictive because I sort of need to get back to a little bit more of paid work. Not much, just a little bit to supplement what I'm doing here because my government mat leave is about to run out. Money is tight, as it is for everyone. We're trying to sell our house, which we might have to pull off the market and put back on later in the year. which is fine. We're in a lucky position where we can borrow a bit of money and pay that money back when we do eventually sell. So it's not as dire as what some situations would be. But money's just so tight that I sort of need to find a way to return to a bit more paid work. But for me, that's got an audio component. I'm a video producer. So I've been put on a project where I think they want to start filming in 2 weeks. My mum is away. My dad is away. They're away together. I'm not going to ask really anyone else to step in and do that. And she's probably not going to take a bottle. I could bottle train every night up until then. Don't know how I'm going to fit that in because I'm not even expressing at the moment. And so my word is restrictive because
it is.
Yeah.
When George was the same, Haim took a bottle from the first week of his life and never made enough milk, so he always had a bottle of Expressed or formula or something. George just was boob because I was like you. I did not want to pump again. I just did not enjoy it. It made me feel hideous. So I just fed him on the boob, killing it. And then 5 months rolls around, doesn't take a bottle. And I'm like, fuck. But even in the early days when I was just breastfeeding and it was fine, I was still working and I had a really important meeting in Melbourne and I couldn't not go to the meeting. I also couldn't leave the baby because the baby was only 8 weeks old. So, of course, I had to get my mum to come over with me, who I am so bloody lucky to have that option. But I had to have her come over with me to hold the baby when I was in a meeting, pass me the baby when I needed to feed the baby. To say it's restrictive is so honest because it is so restrictive. There are so many things you can't do.
Yeah. And
when
I
you're
don't know about
breastfeeding.
you, but I was saying to someone recently that I knew to experience the weight of responsibility and of your body being someone else's nourishment and all of those things. I knew to expect that those things would happen again the second time around. What I didn't realize, and I'll be interested to know if you felt this way, is that breastfeeding again, giving birth again, having sleepless nights of feeding a baby overnight again, it doesn't really just feel like I'm doing it again. It feels like the weight of it all is tripled. And maybe that part of that is because I've had 2 under 2. But I realized the other day I've either been breastfeeding or pregnant for 3 years. And so no wonder I'm feeling a bit flat at times and a bit tired and a bit tapped out because that's pretty wild when you think about it. For 30 years no one relied on me really. And then all of a sudden for 3 years your body is someone else's for the entirety of that time.
No, I get that. I so get that.
Yeah.
And I also think when it's number 2, everything is just more complicated because you're breastfeeding or you're pumping or you're giving the baby a bottle. You've also got another little person that's really like, if it's anything like the experience I had with when George came along, very emotional, not really into the whole sibling thing. And you got to pander to that and then go through everything else. It's breastfeeding's tricky as well with the second when you do have a child quite young. Hamish was 2.5, and they're still young enough to think, hang on a minute, that's my body, that's my mum, that's what I did. Who's this?
Ray does sometimes climb on me, actually. It's funny. I was nervous that he'd try and feed, but he does definitely climb and get right up in there. And I'll be like, Darcy, don't poke her eye out. I'm trying to feed her.
Even now, like when one sits on me, the other wants to sit on me. It's like they look at you and you're their land, like you're their everything.
Yes.
Like don't move in on my space. And it is so quick to have one baby on you, then 2, and then the fight breaks out. You're like, I was just having such a nice moment, and now like there's a war on in front of me.
I know. It goes from like poetry, like the most beautiful poem you could ever write, to being like the most insane thing. Then you're nearly in tears and you can't even quite say why.
And you don't want to be there.
And I make that.
You've gone from feeling warm and loved to be like, get me out of here.
I know. And on that, I must say, because this time around I have been more focused on my exercise, if I can give any tip to any mum that's feeling a bit like me, and I've painted a dark picture, but honestly, I love this gig more than anything on this planet, and the euphoria is worth all of the low moments. But my biggest advice on what we're sort of talking about is, do not make excuses for why you can't get to a Pilates class. The amount of times that I've been saying to Hayde something like, oh, she slept in, so that's going to throw things out a bit. I can't really go to that class, can I? Because she'll wake up and she'll need a feed and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, just go. because it's better for him as well if I go, because then I come back a happier mum. So stop making excuses for why your kids need you. I know how overwhelming it is to be needed and how responsible you feel for that. But if I've learned anything lately in this postpartum, and also just with other personal things that have been really upsetting lately that we've had to go through with the loss of a friend, is that you need to make time for yourself, or you potentially will go mad.
When I was pregnant with Haim, I couldn't work out if at the very start of the pregnancy there was complications around the shape of my cervix. All worked out in the end. However, I was toying up with, do I stay on antidepressants or do I come off them? Because I was really like, if there's 0.5% of risk, I don't want to add any risk to this pregnancy. Anyway, so I just couldn't make up this decision. And my GP was so great. She was just like, look, you need to feel good, comfortable, content, maybe not happy all the time, but you need to feel safe in your own body, good in your own body.
Yeah.
If you don't feel good, everything else is going to fall down around you. So the decision for you is to what is going to make me feel good. You do that, and then that'll set you up to be a better mum or a more confident mum. And
that's like the best piece of advice you could ever get, because there's all the terrible advice you get pregnant, but that's like bang on.
Oh, 100%. So I think sometimes the you time, it can be glorified in a way that it's, it's pampering, whatever else. It's actually not. It's just recharging your batteries, just letting you get back to, so then when you return to the family to do all the things, you're getting the best version of you.
100%. If you think about it, it's truly wild that you'll spend your entire life just sort of really doing what you want to an extent. And then we're expected to, maybe not expected, I don't know. We're expected to all of a sudden adjust to this totally different set of responsibilities. Like as Fern Chang recently said on my podcast, she's not surprised so many people get postnatal depression, because look at the ways in which we're trying to mother without the village that they used to have historically. And your entire world has just changed. And yeah, there's a lot of beauty in that, but it's no wonder we have such deep feelings in motherhood, because it's just, the relentlessness of being needed is just unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Well, I am so grateful for having you come onto the podcast, but that is why I love Ready or Not. It's the deep feelings that you unveil in all of the women. Some of whom I go in. Nell Frizzell is one of, I read her book. What's it called? The great book.
The Panic Years.
Yes, I read that after I had my baby.
So good.
And I still resonated with so much of how she wrote. She's just brilliant. But anyway, I have this idea of how people will be. And then you hear their stories and you're like, oh, wow, so you're just a human.
Yes, that's the other thing. It's the universality of motherhood. I was saying to a friend recently, and we agreed that even if you haven't had something like postnatal depression, I can never pretend that I understand exactly what that's like. But I think in motherhood, there is a universality in experience where I can semi-wrap my head around it. Like, whereas once upon a time, I wouldn't have understood what someone might feel like when they have depression. But having gone through motherhood and going through postpartum, I understand to an extent what postpartum depression must feel like. And I feel like there's a real universality around all of that to do with motherhood that's pretty powerful.
I feel the same about women in general. I think regardless of where anyone is in the world, their job, whatever else, every woman, not every woman due to medical reasons, but most women will have their period, will have some kind of fertility discussion, will birth, will go through postpartum, or none of that, and then go through perimenopause and menopause. Like we follow the same trajectory. We do all have so much intrinsically that is connecting us. Beyond anything, that we add in the context of our lives. I think that's why I'm so fascinated in women, because we can all relate.
Yes.
On the bare bones of the fact that we go through life and go through these huge hormonal shifts together.
Yeah. Hormones are wild.
Well, I just admire you so much, and I love all the content. Keep it coming. If you are comfortable, do the behind the scenes thing. I think you are fantastic. I would never second question yourself. Put it up. People will love it. But thank you for your honesty.
I love everything you're doing.
You're a pleasure. Well, I hope tonight, dinner, bath, bed, all the rest, I hope it goes smoothly.
Thank
My
you. I
fingers are
think
crossed
Hades
for
will
you.
be Thanks. Hades will be wearing the brunt of that one, I think. So that's good for me.
Good on you, Hades. All right, lovely.
Thank you
Well,
so
it's
much
been
for having
lovely to
me.
chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.